Evolve Beyond Borders is proud to introduce Sven Elbert, Director at Fosway Group. Sven is a seasoned speaker and advisor with over 2 decades of experience in the HR industry. He helps corporate clients accelerate their decision-making across all aspects of next-gen cloud HCM and talent management. Let's welcome Sven as he shares his insights on Flexible Working Trends 2023.
Hello, welcome. My name is Sven Elbert from Fosway Group. I'm a senior analyst, and I'm very excited to join Evolve Beyond Borders today. Welcome to all of you. Happy New Year as well. Today we will be talking about flexible working trends. So Flexible Working Trends 2023. Obviously, it has been quite an interesting year for HR. And so we want to look at these trends from a perspective of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And certainly, those of you who are maybe not familiar with Fosway, we are Europe's #1 HR industry analyst. So we do a lot of independent vendor research and EMEA market commentary. And a study that I would obviously like to introduce you today, 311 participants participated in this EMEA-wide. The majority, 65% of respondents, were from organizations with more than 1,000 employees. And so what I want to do is actually look at, what is happening with flexible working during these times, and basically look at it from 3 perspectives. For one, from the operational level, which will be in this chapter, but then also from a strategic and a tactical level, and basically will introduce you to what our study has found. Particularly during the pandemic, we have seen significant shifts in how people worked, where they worked, and when they worked. So many organizations, 92% have made changes, and even 74% have made significant changes. And desk-based work in particular has changed so much. It has changed completely to be now hybrid or virtual. Only 8%, very few organizations actually, who did not make changes or did not maybe have to make changes, because obviously a lot of organizations also had to introduce new tools, new digital tools, new collaboration tools, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, all sorts of kind of collaborative tools were needed to really cope with the situation during the pandemic. And as we're moving out of the pandemic, to some degree at least, we have asked the question why organizations were actually doing or moving to flexible work. And you can see that the #1 reason why organizations have moved to flexible and hybrid working is that they want to retain and even attract employees with these flexible working schemes. So employee engagement is another important factor, employee well-being. Obviously, companies are saving some cost because obviously they maybe don't need as much office space anymore, and many have actually reduced it. But this is even not the most predominant factor as to why flexible working is being used so much during these days. Also, sustainability is not the driving factor. The driving factor is really retention and employee attraction. So then basically, we've had this huge discussion in the past historically, if working from home or hybrid work was actually more productive. And, there was a big skepticisms out there from line managers, from leaders, also from HR. But now that we have all experienced it in the past 2 years, definitely HR professionals do agree that flexible working is driving higher priorities, and only 6% disagree. So from an employee's perspective, obviously they save time commuting, They are less interrupted maybe in their work. They can control a little bit better. Certainly there's also issues around, more silos, between teams. Those are increasing, and obviously some of those virtual collaborations are a bit more difficult in this scenario, but also we have fairly much adjusted to this. So to summarize, really, our study has found that flexible working is definitely here to stay. The majority of organizations is saying that they're even stabilizing or even accelerating. 35% are saying they're accelerating their approach. And so only 9% are maybe saying that they're winding back. So I think these are very interesting findings. But if we then look at maybe some of the trends on an operational level for both desk-based and non-desk-based workers, then I think it's interesting to see that we can observe some of these trends where work is getting, if we look at desk-based maybe first, then work is getting more globally distributed. Organizations are increasingly location agnostic. It does not really matter where you work. You could sit, here in Germany where I am at home, or I could even sit in Mallorca in a nice beach location, or in Asia or in Americas. I mean, the driving factor is really the time zone. So we are seeing that work is getting globally more distributed, desk-based work also. And many tasks are distributed to locations also with lower wage costs. We see this, for example, a small example, but you can see it in probably all industries really, is in the healthcare industry. For example, here, magnetic resonance scans, they are done locally, obviously in a hospital here in Europe, but then the analysis is maybe done in Asia Pacific, and then the results are being sent back to Europe. So you see that this is affecting also very qualified levels of work, really expert work, and at the same time, it's also getting more fragmented. So it's more around maybe distributing work in a different way, that you have more gigs or more project orientated work, so that employees can leverage their skills in the best possible way. And obviously this also creates development opportunities for them. So I think we see that also it is becoming increasingly more easy to open up a new office. Sometimes you don't even have to open up an office. You can just use an employer of record agreement or a solution that helps facilitate this. So you don't even have to open an office anymore in those regions if you just want to employ, say, maybe 1 or 2 employees in that location. And corporates are having huge success with this. They can try out markets. They can have their digital skills be more distributed globally. And obviously that creates better opportunities for the corporations. With regard to non-desk-based work, obviously that historically also during the pandemic has still been a lot of on-site work. What we are seeing though is that if it's possible to do multi-site arrangements with employees so that they can maybe work not just in one store, in a retail store in Paris, say, they would then work in multiple ones potentially where the need arises. So there's a lot of flexing around the location as well, particularly in large cities where this is obviously possible. So non-desk-based work is also looking to become more resilient. People should have more breathing space, for example, in Europe during the summer. In the last year, we also see it in other industries. There were, for example, the airports who were struggling because they didn't have enough people able to handle the luggage. So there were a lot of queues, waiting times, unhappy customers. So obviously this is something where organizations need to plan better in advance and also have more resilient approach. So not just relying maybe on one partner that they work with in terms of contracting or flexing work, but maybe multiple. So I think that is another important trend. Another important trend also is around introducing more fixed flex models. So flexible working as an employee, I mean, we all kind of want it, but then there's certainly limitations to it, right? Because obviously people cannot have full flexibility because, everyone kind of needs to, at some point, pick up their children from school or from kindergarten or whatever. So you need to have a bit of a mix and a range around what the employees prefer on their terms, but then it has to be a bit of a fixed model. So I think this is also what we are increasingly seeing here in Europe. And also particularly due to the recession and the cost of living crisis, many employees are also looking for extra earning opportunities. So where in the past maybe they weren't too keen to do an additional extra shift, they are maybe now interested in actually earning a little bit of extra or doing maybe a swap with someone who's working on the weekend because they get some extra pay for weekend work. So those are obviously some of the trends that we're seeing on an operational level. Let's move then to the strategic level. So now skipping the tactical one, we'll certainly circle back to it at the end. But maybe first of all, let's look at it strategically and let's look at, the business climate that organizations are facing at the moment, which is obviously changing probably faster than ever, and see what implications that has on organizations' approach to flex work. The pandemic has been only one crisis, right? 2 years back, it was obviously the predominant and the major crisis, but then we've seen supply chains breaking down, supply chain crises, which of course their own version of inflation, and this has again accelerated now further because of obviously increased armed conflict here in the region. So now we are definitely going to move across many countries in Europe into a recession, which is going to last 1 or 2 years at least. Energy security, cost of living crises, these are like in the news, the predominant kind of factors where organizations need to cope with, but also long term, there is still this digital and agile transformation that is going on in organizations over here. And also the climate crisis is driving much more shifts in the workplaces as well, because workers obviously need to rescale and upskill. Because, for example, here in Germany, the automotive industry, obviously we are no longer going to produce as many fuel-based kind of cars, but more battery electric vehicles. So that obviously means you need a different skill set for the workers in all the industries that supply parts to the automotive manufacturers. And interestingly, we are running this survey, by the way, for now 6 or 7 years. And always, increasing performance and profitability has been the number one thing, the number one business challenge that organizations were facing. However, for the first year and for the first time ever, availability of skills is currently, the number one business challenge. So this sounds a little bit like a paradox situation, doesn't it? Because on the one hand, we are moving into recession, and on the other hand, we are talking about a skills crisis. And this is really an interesting situation that we haven't really had before, and it has obviously extremely interesting implications for HR and how HR is perceived within an organization. And the skills crisis is certainly as much about skills with a capital S, so skills as in people or workforce, because there's definitely a lack of people in absolute terms, but also then skills with a small s around, for example, digital skills or power skills, where certain skills are actually in very high demand and very low supply. And this does obviously make it an important topic, not only for the current recession, but also longer term for maybe until 2025, where organizations are really looking at skills and skills enablement to future-proof themselves for 2025. So in the midterm, organizations really need to empower all talents and liberate all employee potentials through lifelong learning. And also flexible working is very high up the agenda of HR leaders at the moment to future-proof organizations for 2025. And why is that really so important? Because obviously the digital transformation, the decarbonization of the economies, that has to happen really fast. By 2030 is the European Union's goal, or by 2040, depending on, some industries obviously will be lagging behind. For example, the cement industry will be slower. But there's definitely this push that really it drives all industries and makes skill the number one currency at the moment. And if you combine again, if we then combine this, the recession and the skills availability crisis, then obviously it is no surprise that actually workforce planning is moving up the ranks in terms of priority for HR. So last year it was, I think, number 11 or so. Now it's number 5 here on this list. So for HR teams' future success, workforce planning, strategic workforce planning actually is really, really important. And more focus is put on it. And so let's look at maybe some of the flexible working trends on the strategic level, particularly with regards to workforce planning. Organizations are looking to run more scenarios. Obviously, with the recession, nobody is really certain how bad or good it will really get. There's obviously some upside. There's certainly a lot of downside as well, depending on how, a disarmed conflict in the Ukraine goes forward. Obviously, it can turn south very quickly and very deeply. But also if, maybe it ends a little bit sooner than we currently would expect, obviously then there's maybe some upside potential. So definitely organizations are trying to kind of understand what implications does that have on us, on our business, on our people, on our workforce. What skills do we need in the future and where do we need them? Again, this question around, where do we put people in what kind of locations is becoming more important. So resilience, particularly for organizations here in Europe, is becoming more of a question. So around the supply chain, where do I put people? How do I become less dependent on maybe one supplier? How can I diversify my risk? And this really is what organizations are using these strategic models for, to kind of get a flavor of where they need to be. Historically, workforce planning has always been like, this monster exercise of, collecting all the data in Excel sheets, doing number crunching, and kind of coming up with your headcount plans that were, a year ahead or something. And these planning cycles are certainly shortening. It has to be more real time, and it has to be more connected to the actual data that you can pull from your cloud HR solution, really, so that you're actually able, this enables you to run these multiple scenarios. If you don't have that, then there's really not much of an option because, collecting all the data, maybe now and then in 3 months and then another 3 months, it's going to take a lot of overhead and too much work. You cannot really simulate all of this. So the focus is going to be definitely also on value creation, and the skills that are needed for the future. So what capabilities do we need strategically? What are the things that will become important? And then the big question is around buying, borrowing, or building these. So do I, build pipeline on the recruiting side? Maybe, I'm not so confident to hire people in at the moment. So perhaps more organizations will look to borrow them, but certainly a lot will definitely want to build skills and upskill their workforce to meet some of these strategic skill demands. That is definitely, I think, the major trends that we're going to see in 2023 on the strategic level for flex work. And then if we move in the third section of the presentation more to the technical level, then obviously this is, you know, the mid-term, maybe the like the 12 next month, and definitely what are some of the actual things you could do right now, a bit, you know, not like on an operational level, like on the specific shift, on the specific task an employee is working on, but what kind of programs can organizations put in place to make this flexible working a reality over the next 12 months. So a lot of organizations, 77%, are prioritizing the employee experience, because obviously the business disruption is high. The pandemic has disrupted the business. Energy crisis is disrupting it. Digital transformation is disrupting it. So we are seeing these accelerated disruptions, and obviously you cannot plan really maybe what is happening in 3 months. All you know is that you have a highly engaged, highly motivated, well-performing workforce. Then that is obviously going to be to your very big advantage, and this can accelerate your business outcomes. And for this, you really need a great employee experience. And many HR leaders, HR teams have realized this and are putting great attention on it. Also, by the way, the C-suite is actually really helping HR to make a big and significant change these days. So there's a lot of, CEOs, COOs, CFOs who also support this increased focus on employee experience, which is oftentimes simplifying the experience for employees, taking actually a lot of complexity out. It's about outcomes, really. It's not so much about, you know, how many clicks you have on your software, despite maybe some vendors thinking mostly about it from a user interface or user experience perspective. It is really for employees, it's really about the outcomes. Like, how difficult is it to engage with HR? How easy is it to book a holiday? It shouldn't be a big thing, right? It shouldn't distract me from work. And how can I progress my career, right? So what is my next step? How can I learn more? How can I build these skills that I need in the future? These are the questions that obviously employees are asking themselves, and here organizations want to and need to have a better experience for their staff. So we've then asked, like, what are maybe some of the things, experiences that are actually getting accelerated in the year ahead? And also we have asked on the next slide, what is getting slowed down or even stopped? And I think it's interesting that flexible working here is also on number one. So many organizations, 56%, are accelerating their approach, you know, pushing things even further, pushing the boundaries here in this space. But also almost equally important is the employer brand. Great reputation as an employer is really key to attract talent, but also to retain talent. And then equally important and accelerated is getting diversity initiatives, equal opportunities. You know, definitely something where a lot of organizations are or have maybe in the last 1 or 2 years kind of taken it a little bit slower and kind of try to understand how they want to act and what diversity means to them in the different areas that they operate in the different countries, because there's a significant difference, right? And you have to tailor your strategies to those locations really to be successful. And hence, now we are seeing organizations wanting to execute on the work that they have done to prepare for this. I think this is an interesting one as well. And then on the lower three, those are around well-being. Obviously, still a lot of people feel maybe a little bit isolated if they work from home. So making sure that people feel well on a personal level is really key, mentally as well as also financially, which we will cover on maybe also a couple of minutes. But also the approach to career progression and professional development is what organizations are accelerating during these times. Okay, so then let's look at what they are maybe slowing down or stopping. And I think this is really interesting because this is your opportunity space. If you are maybe not as hard hit by the recession, then obviously this is your gold nugget. This is your opportunity. Okay, so what is happening here? A lot of organizations are actually compromising on some parts of their employer value proposition. They are looking to make compromise on the competitiveness of their salaries. They are maybe not pushing benefits and perks as much, reducing them or slowing them. They are maybe also, wanting people to work more in the office and work extra hours, so they are more demanding. And this actually is quite a big risk for them. If you remember what we have seen during the COVID pandemic, it was widely underestimated how easily employees, after a certain while, wanted to leave the employer and look for new opportunities. And I think, particularly since we are in a significant financial cost of living crisis for employees, this can become quite an accelerator. And maybe we are, or at least these 20% of organizations, or 16 or whatever, are moving into a big risk of experiencing a Great Resignation 2.0, right? So it's really important now that organizations understand what are the financial challenges that their team members have, that managers have programs that they can pull from to actually make things a little bit easier, because a lot of people don't know how to pay the energy bills, or if something breaks down in the household, like the fridge or the washing machine or dryer or whatever, then they have to make a huge investment that can drive them really into deep trouble. So 3 things that you should really focus on right now: listen very, very carefully, understand your employee needs, build trust, and make sure that you have programs in place for their financial well-being, and also make sure that you have a retention and development strategy. So I think these 3 things, employee listening, financial well-being, and retention and development, are really, really key for organizations these days. And there's certainly things that organizations want to put in place around maybe a pay raise, or maybe it's one-time payments if they don't want to fuel the inflation. Maybe they want to give employees earned or early access to their earned salaries, those kind of initiatives. But also internal mobility, coaching, mentoring, reskilling, upskilling are all things you can do on the retention and development side. So those are really, really important examples. And maybe to summarize, we've seen on the 3 levels quite a few trends that are happening in the place in the world at the moment. And certainly a lot of these initiatives don't need HR technology, but many actually do, right? So if you have like an employee listening tool, a survey tool, you can use it. If you have a salary review tool, you can use it easily to distribute the budget fairly and also based on the performance of the employees. So these are just some few examples. So ultimately, what we are finding, and this is really good news, on which I will end, investment into the HR function over the next year ahead is increasing on a broad sense, particularly in technology, but also to develop HR expertise, and even into HR headcount. There's more organizations, 30%, who want to hire or increase their headcount, whereas only 18% are looking maybe to reduce it. So definitely good times to be in HR. With that, I shall end it. I hope you found it interesting. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out. You will find this research and more as well on our website. And with that, I thank you very much and wish you a great Evolve Beyond Borders. Take care. Goodbye.